Hashtag one human shot ignited a full galactic war. The merchant vessel Starlight's edge drifted through the Kepler 442 system like a metal whale swimming through an ocean of stars. Captain Sarah Chun watched the navigation display with tired eyes, noting their approach to the refueling station orbiting the system's second planet. After 3 months of hauling agricultural supplies to the outer rim colonies, she was ready for shore leave and a hot meal that didn't come from a recycling unit. "Captain, we're getting a priority transmission from Nexus Station," announced Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the communications console. His voice carried an edge that made Sarah look up sharply. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Admiral Harrison Blake, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet's Outer Rim Division. His usually composed expression was tight with concern. "Captain Chun, I need you to divert immediately to coordinates 847 Delta 9. We've lost contact with a research station on Kepler 442c. Sarah frowned. "Admiral, with respect, we're a merchant vessel. Shouldn't this be handled by a military ship?" "Under normal circumstances, yes. But you're the closest vessel to those coordinates, and time is critical." The station was conducting sensitive research into alien artifacts recovered from the vegan ruins. "If something's gone wrong," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "The implications could be severe." The vegan ruins. Sarah had heard whispers about the ancient alien structures discovered on the edge of known space. Humanity had been alone in the galaxy for so long that finding evidence of another intelligent species, even an extinct one, had sent shockwaves through both scientific and political communities. "What kind of research, Admiral?" "Classified. Just get there, assess the situation, and report back." "Chun, I'm transmitting emergency authorization codes. If necessary, you have permission to defend yourself using any means at your disposal." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Sarah's crew exchanged glances. Marcus was the first to speak. "Captain, we don't exactly have military-grade weapons. Just standard defensive systems and a small security team." "I know." Sarah studied the coordinates on her screen. Kepler 442c was a barren world, tidally locked to its star. The research station had been built in the twilight zone between the burning day side and the frozen night side. But Admiral Blake doesn't make requests like this lightly. Set course for those coordinates. Maximum burn. As the Starlight's edge changed course and accelerated toward the mysterious planet, none of the crew could have imagined that their next few hours would reshape the entire galaxy. The journey to Kepler 442c took 18 hours. During that time, Sarah's communications officer tried repeatedly to raise the research station, but received only static. Long-range sensors showed the station's power signature was still active, but there were no life sign readings, which could mean either the worst had happened or the station's biosensors were malfunctioning. "Captain, we're approaching the station now," reported Navigator Susan Park, bringing us into standard orbit. Through the viewports, Kepler 442c looked like a world painted in half-light. One hemisphere blazed with the perpetual fire of stellar radiation, while the other lay buried in eternal night. The research station hung in the planet's shadow, a cluster of interconnected modules that looked disturbingly dark. "Launch the shuttle," Sarah ordered. "I'm taking a security team aboard." "Captain, perhaps I should lead the team," suggested Chief of Security James Rodriguez. A former Marine, Rodriguez had seen combat during the border conflicts with the Martian separatists. "No, James. I want you here in case we run into trouble. If something's happened to that research team, I need to see it firsthand." An hour later, Sarah found herself suited up and boarding the shuttle with 3 security officers. As they approached the research station's docking bay, the silence was deafening. No navigation lights, no docking guidance signals, nothing but the cold gleam of metal in space. The docking bay's atmospheric seals were functional, which was a relief. Once they'd cycled through, Sarah and her team found themselves in a well-lit corridor that should have been bustling with activity. Instead, it was empty. Motion sensors aren't picking up anything, reported Sergeant Kim Davis, consulting her scanner. But there's definitely power to the life support systems. They made their way through the station methodically. The living quarters were empty, but showed no signs of struggle. The laboratory sections were similarly abandoned, though Sarah noticed that several workstations were still active, displaying streams of data that meant nothing to her. It was in the main research lab that they found the first sign of what had happened. The room was dominated by a large containment chamber, its transparent aluminum walls scorched and blackened. Inside the chamber lay the twisted remains of what had once been a complex piece of alien technology, part of the artifacts recovered from the vegan ruins. But the artifact wasn't what made Sarah's blood run cold. It was the bodies. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the station's lead xenoarchaeologist, lay crumpled near the containment chamber's control console. Her body showed no obvious wounds, but her face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror. Around the room, 6 other researchers lay in similar positions, as if they had simply dropped dead where they stood. "My God," whispered Private Torres. "What could have done this?" Before Sarah could answer, the station's emergency lighting suddenly activated, bathing everything in pulsing red light. A recorded voice began playing over the intercom system. "This is Dr. Martinez, chief researcher at Station Kepler 7. If you're hearing this message, then the containment protocols have failed, and I'm probably dead." The voice was calm, professional, but Sarah could hear the underlying fear. 3 days ago, we made a breakthrough in deciphering the vegan artifact's energy matrix. We thought we had discovered a new form of power generation. We were wrong. Sarah and her team listened in growing horror as the recording continued. The artifact isn't a power source. It's a beacon. When we activated it, it sent a signal across space. We've detected incoming ships. They're not human. I repeat, they are not human vessels. Estimated arrival time is 72 hours from this recording. God help us all. The recording cut off, leaving the 4 humans alone with the terrible implications of what they'd just heard. Sarah was reaching for her communicator to contact the Starlight's Edge when new alarms began blaring throughout the station. But these weren't recorded warnings. They were real-time proximity alerts. "Captain," Sergeant Davis was staring at her scanner in disbelief. "I'm reading massive contacts dropping out of hyperspace. They're surrounding the planet." Through the laboratory's viewport, Sarah could see them now. Ships unlike anything in human design emerged from ripples in space-time. They were sleek and organic-looking, with hulls that seemed to flow like liquid metal. And there were dozens of them. As the alien fleet took position around Kepler 442c, Sarah realized that humanity's long isolation in the galaxy was about to end in the worst possible way. The ancient vegan beacon had called them home. The first alien transmission came 20 minutes later. It wasn't directed at the research station, but at the Starlight's Edge. Sarah heard it through her communicator as she and her team raced back to their shuttle. The voice was cold, mechanical, yet somehow conveying infinite disdain. "Primitive species, you have activated that which was forbidden. You have trespassed in the domain of the hegemony. Surrender for processing, or be exterminated." Captain Chun to all ships in the area. Sarah broadcast on all emergency frequencies as their shuttle cleared the station. "This is a priority alert to Earth Command. We have made first contact with a hostile alien species. Repeat, first contact with hostile aliens. They're demanding our surrender." The response from Admiral Blake came through moments later. "Negative, Captain Chun. Humanity does not surrender. Get your people out of there." What happened next will be debated by historians for centuries to come. Later, some would call Captain Sarah Chun a hero. Others would blame her for starting an interstellar war. But in that moment, as alien ships began moving toward the Starlight's Edge with obvious hostile intent, Sarah made the decision that felt right. She ordered her ship to fight. The Starlight's Edge wasn't a warship. Its defensive systems consisted of point defense lasers designed to destroy incoming missiles and debris, not alien spacecraft. But Merchant marine regulations required all vessels to be equipped with at least minimal defensive capabilities. The first alien ship that moved to intercept them was roughly the size of a human destroyer, its hull shimmering with energy patterns that suggested advanced shielding technology. As it closed a weapon's range, Sarah could see weapon ports opening along its flanks. "All hands, this is the captain," Sarah announced over the ship's intercom. "We are under attack by alien forces. This is not a drill. All crew to battle stations." The alien ship fired first. Beams of coherent energy lanced out toward the starlight's edge, but Chief Engineer Patricia Wong had been ready. The merchant vessel's engines flared to life, throwing them into an evasive spiral that caused most of the alien shots to miss. "Return fire," Sarah ordered. Lieutenant Webb, manning the weapon's console, activated their point defense grid. Compared to the alien vessel's sophisticated energy weapons, the Starlight's Edge's lasers were primitive. But they were human-built, and they worked. The concentrated fire from 6 laser turrets struck the alien ship's forward shields, causing ripples of energy to cascade across its hull. For a moment, it seemed as though their attacks were having no effect. Then, suddenly, catastrophically, the alien ship's shields collapsed, and the laser beams punched through its hull. The alien vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light that illuminated half the planet below. For several heartbeats, nobody on either side seemed to believe what had just happened. A primitive human merchant vessel had just destroyed an advanced alien warship in single combat. Then, the remaining alien fleet opened fire with everything they had. What followed was less a battle than a running fight. The Starlight's Edge was fast and maneuverable, but she was outnumbered 50-1. Captain Chun pushed her ship to its limits, diving through the planet's atmosphere to use the thick air as cover, then bursting back into space to avoid the worst of the alien barrage. Somehow, impossibly, they kept fighting. Chief Engineer Wong managed to reroute power from non-essential systems to boost their defensive capabilities. Weapons Officer Webb scored hits on 3 more alien ships, though none resulted in kills like that first lucky shot. Navigator Park plotted escape courses that took advantage of the planet's gravitational field to slingshot them away from pursuing enemies. But they all knew it couldn't last. The aliens were learning their tactics, adapting to human unpredictability. More ships were arriving to join the hunt. It was only a matter of time before the Starlight's Edge would be overwhelmed. That's when the cavalry arrived. "All ships, this is Admiral Blake aboard the CNV Defiant. Earth Defense Fleet is engaging alien hostiles. All civilian vessels are ordered to withdraw to minimum safe distance." Through the viewports, Sarah could see the most beautiful sight in the galaxy: a full battle group of Earth Defense Fleet ships dropping out of hyperspace. Cruisers, destroyers, and the massive bulk of the carrier Defiant herself, bristling with weapons and fighter craft. The Admiral had been closer than he'd let on. Much closer. As Earth's warships engaged the alien fleet, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. Her ship was damaged, but intact. Her crew was alive, and humanity was no longer alone in its fight. But as she watched the first true space battle between humans and aliens unfold around her, Sarah Chun couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That single shot from the Starlight's Edge, the first human weapon fired in anger at an alien target, had started something that would engulf the entire galaxy. The hegemony had found humanity, and humanity had shown them that it would not go quietly into extinction. In the depths of space, more alien fleets were already receiving the call to arms. The beacon's signal had traveled far, awakening sleeping armadas that had not stirred for 10,000 years. Soon, hundreds of species would learn of the upstart humans who dared to resist the hegemony's dominion. They would learn why that had been a mistake. But first, they would have to survive the next few hours. As Admiral Blake's task force clashed with the alien fleet in the shadow of Kepler 442c, both sides quickly realized they were evenly matched. Human ingenuity and determination against alien technology and numbers. It was going to be a very long war. The battle around Kepler 442c raged for 6 hours. When the smoke cleared, both sides had learned valuable lessons about their enemies. The aliens discovered that humans were far more dangerous than their primitive technology suggested. Humans learned that they were facing an enemy with technology centuries ahead of their own, and the will to use it for genocide. As the surviving alien ships retreated into hyperspace, Admiral Blake's task force began rescue operations and damage assessment. Captain Sarah Chun found herself summoned aboard the flagship for debriefing, but she already knew what questions she would be asked. Had humanity fired the first shot? Technically, yes. Was it justified? She believed so with every fiber of her being. Would it matter to the historians? Only time would tell. But as the Starlight's edge limped toward the nearest human world for repairs, Sarah Chun looked out at the stars and wondered how many alien fleets were already heading toward Earth. How many species would rally to the hegemony's call for humanity's extinction? She didn't know, but she was certain of one thing: humanity would be ready for them. The galaxy was about to discover why humans had survived and thrived on a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. Why they had clawed their way from caves to starships through sheer bloody-minded determination. The hegemony thought they were facing a primitive species ripe for conquest or extermination. They were about to learn why that was the last mistake they would ever make. One human shot had ignited a galactic war. Before it was over, that war would reshape the very structure of galactic civilization. And at its center would be a species that refused to surrender, refused to submit, and refused to die quietly. Humanity was about to show the galaxy what it meant to fight for survival. The first battle was over, but the real war was just beginning. #1 human shot ignited a full galactic war. 2nd Chronicle 3 weeks after the battle at Kepler 442c, Captain Sarah Chun stood in the war room of Luna Station, Earth's military headquarters, surrounded by the most powerful people in human space. President Martinez, Admiral Blake, and a dozen other high-ranking officials studied holographic displays showing the current state of humanity's defenses. It painted a grim picture. Intelligence reports indicate at least 47 different alien species have pledged ships to the hegemony's campaign against humanity, reported Director Susan Walsh of Earth Intelligence. They call us the plague species in their communications. Plague species. President Martinez's eyebrows rose. That's rather melodramatic. Not when you understand their perspective, Madam President, said Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the xenobiologist who had been studying captured alien technology. From what we've been able to decipher from their databases, the hegemony has ruled this galaxy for over 50,000 years. In all that time, no species has successfully resisted them. Admiral Blake leaned forward. Until now. Exactly. Our very existence challenges the fundamental order they've built. To them, we're not just another primitive species to be conquered. We're a virus that could spread resistance throughout their empire. Sarah found herself thinking about the crew of the research station, dead from whatever that alien beacon had done to them. What about the vegans? The species that built those ruins we found? Dr. Harper's expression darkened. From what we can tell, they were the last species to mount serious resistance against the hegemony. That was 10,000 years ago. They lost. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, President Martinez spoke. What are our defensive capabilities, Admiral? Better than they were a month ago, but still inadequate, Blake admitted. We've managed to upgrade our fleet with technology reverse-engineered from the alien ships we destroyed at Kepler. Our new plasma cannons and improved shields give us roughly parity with hegemony vessels in one-on-one combat. But, Sarah prompted, intelligence suggests they're assembling a force of over 3,000 ships for their next assault. We have maybe 200 vessels that could be considered combat-ready. The mathematics were stark. Even with their technological improvements, humanity was facing 15-to-1 odds against an enemy with millennia of military experience. There's one potential advantage, Dr. Harper said carefully. Our analysis of hegemony communications suggests they've become complacent. 50,000 years of unchallenged dominance has made them predictable. They follow rigid tactical doctrines, established hierarchies. They don't improvise well. While humans, Admiral Blake said with a grim smile, have been improvising our way out of impossible situations since we learned to throw rocks at predators. President Martinez stood, her decision made. Admiral, I'm authorizing the Prometheus Protocol. Begin immediate implementation. Sarah didn't recognize the code name, but she could see from the expressions around the room that it was significant. Admiral Blake nodded gravely. Understood, Madam President. We'll begin evacuation of non-essential populations to the outer colonies immediately. Evacuation? Sarah asked. Fortress Earth, Blake explained. If we can't match the hegemony's numbers, we'll make them pay for every inch of human space. Turn every world, every station, every asteroid into a fortress. Make them bleed for their victory. As the meeting broke up, Sarah found herself walking with Dr. Harper through Luna Station's observation deck. Through the massive, transparent aluminum windows, Earth hung before them like a blue jewel against the star field. Doctor, can I ask you something? Of course, Captain. Do you really think we can win this? Dr. Harper was quiet for a long moment, watching Earth's slow rotation. Define win, Captain. Can we defeat the entire hegemony in open battle? Probably not. Can we make them regret ever hearing of humanity? Absolutely. Sarah was about to respond when alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lighting activated as a voice echoed through the corridors. All personnel to battle stations. Hostile contacts detected at the edge of the Sol system. This is not a drill. Through the observation windows, Sarah could see the first enemy ships dropping out of hyperspace near the orbit of Pluto. Even at this distance, they were clearly visible as bright stars that hadn't been there moments before. The hegemony had come for Earth. The next few hours transformed into a choreographed dance of destruction as humanity's home fleet deployed to meet the alien invasion. Admiral Blake commanded from the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, humanity's newest and most powerful warship, built using technology captured at Kepler 442c. Sarah found herself back on the Starlight's edge, now refitted with military-grade weapons and assigned to Merchant Marine Defense Squadron 7. Her crew had volunteered to stay aboard rather than transfer to safer positions, and Sarah was grateful for their loyalty. Captain, we're receiving fleet deployment orders, reported Lieutenant Webb. We're assigned to defensive grid Sigma 7, protecting the Luna Station approach. Through her ship's sensors, Sarah could watch the unfolding battle. The hegemony fleet was massive. Over 2,000 ships arranged in perfect formations, advancing on Earth with mathematical precision. Against them, humanity's defenders looked pitifully small. But as the first exchanges of fire began, it became clear that the aliens had underestimated their opponents. Admiral Blake had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment. His ships didn't try to meet the alien fleet head-on. Instead, they scattered into small groups, using Earth's asteroid belt and the gravity wells of the outer planets to mask their movements. The hegemony expected a traditional fleet engagement. What they got was guerrilla warfare on an interplanetary scale. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids to rake alien flanks with plasma fire before disappearing again. Fighter squadrons launched from hidden bases in the asteroid belt, swarming isolated enemy vessels before vanishing back into the rocks. Even civilian ships like the Starlight's Edge contributed, using their superior knowledge of human space to set up ambushes and coordinate attacks. But it wasn't enough. For every alien ship humanity destroyed, 2 more took its place. The enemy was learning, adapting to human tactics with disturbing speed. Captain, long-range sensors are picking up a second wave, Navigator Park reported. Estimated 500 additional contacts, approaching from the galactic north. Sarah's heart sank. A second fleet meant the hegemony was taking Earth seriously. They weren't just trying to conquer humanity, they were trying to exterminate it. That's when humanity showed the alien something they had never encountered before: spite. The order came from Admiral Blake himself, broadcast on all military channels. All ships implement Broken Arrow protocols. Repeat, Broken Arrow is authorized. Sarah knew what that meant. Broken Arrow was the last resort protocol that authorized ship captains to use any means necessary to inflict maximum damage on the enemy, regardless of the cost to themselves. Across the Sol system, human ships began ramming attacks against alien vessels. Cargo haulers loaded with nuclear warheads dove kamikaze style into alien formations. The asteroid mining ship Prospector's Hope detonated its entire cargo of antimatter mining charges in the middle of an enemy squadron, taking 7 alien ships with it. Most shocking of all was what Admiral Blake did with the Indomitable. The massive dreadnought had taken severe damage while leading a charge against the enemy's command ship. Its engines were failing, its weapons mostly offline. By all tactical doctrine, Blake should have ordered an evacuation. Instead, he aimed his dying ship at the largest enemy vessel and activated the self-destruct sequence. The explosion of the Indomitable lit up the Sol system like a second sun. When the light faded, both the human dreadnought and the alien flagship were gone. But Admiral Blake's sacrifice had achieved something beyond the destruction of a single enemy ship. The commander of the Hegemony fleet, Supreme Admiral Korthak of the Vorthan Empire, realized he was facing an enemy unlike any the Hegemony had encountered before. These humans would rather die than surrender. More than that, they turned their deaths into weapons. Over the next 6 hours, the pattern repeated itself across the system. Human ships fought with a ferocity that bordered on insanity, turning every battle into a potential mutual destruction event. They used their own ships as guided missiles, their space stations as bombs, their orbital platforms as kinetic weapons. The Hegemony fleet that had approached Earth numbered over 2,000 vessels. When Supreme Admiral Korthak finally ordered a retreat, barely 800 remained combat effective. But humanity's victory came at a terrible price. Over 60% of Earth's defense fleet was destroyed. Luna Station was heavily damaged. 3 colonies in the outer system were completely evacuated, their populations fleeing deeper into human space. As Sarah Chun stood once again in what remained of Luna Station's war room, surveying the damage reports, she realized that humanity had won a battle but was still losing the war. The good news, reported the new fleet commander, Admiral Patricia Santos, is that we've bloodied their nose badly enough that it will be weeks before they can mount another assault on this scale. And the bad news? President Martinez asked. The bad news is that this was just one of 7 hegemony fleets currently advancing into human space. Intelligence reports show simultaneous attacks being launched against our colonies in the Vega, Centauri, and Gliese sectors. Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. Earth had survived, but at this rate, humanity would be extinct within a year. That's when Dr. Harper spoke up from her position at the intelligence console. There might be another option, she said quietly. Something we discovered in the alien databases captured during the battle. All eyes turned to her. Go on, Doctor. The hegemony isn't as unified as they pretend to be. There are species within their alliance that have been reluctant participants. Conquered races forced to fight for their overlords. And according to these communications intercepts, news of our resistance is spreading. Admiral Santos leaned forward. Are you suggesting some of them might switch sides? I'm suggesting some of them might already be considering it. The hegemony rules through fear and overwhelming force. But we've proven that force can be resisted. That defeats are possible. President Martinez was studying the tactical displays with new interest. What would we need to do to contact these potential allies? That's the problem. They're scattered throughout hegemony space, hundreds of light years away. We need to get a message to them somehow, convince them that humanity represents a real chance for freedom. Sarah found herself speaking before she'd really thought it through. I'll go. The room turned to stare at her. Admiral Santos was the first to speak. Captain, with respect, that's a suicide mission. You'd have to travel through the heart of hegemony space, past dozens of enemy fleets, to reach these potential allies. The chances of survival are essentially zero. Maybe, but someone has to try. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. The alternative is watching our species get picked apart fleet by fleet until there's nothing left. Dr. Harper nodded slowly. There's precedent. The vegan resistance operated for centuries behind enemy lines before they were finally defeated. If we could establish contact with other resistance movements, it would turn this from a war of extermination into a galaxy-wide rebellion. President Martinez finished. Admiral Santos, what's the most advanced, fastest ship in our fleet? The scout ship Hermes. Experimental stealth technology, advanced sensors, and the fastest hyperspace engines we've ever built. But it's never been tested in combat conditions. I don't need it tested, Sarah said. I need it fast and invisible. Over the next week, as hegemony fleets continued their assault on human colonies, the Hermes was prepared for its impossible mission. The ship was equipped with the most advanced technology humanity could provide: adaptive camouflage systems reverse-engineered from captured alien vessels, quantum encryption communicators, and a database containing everything humans had learned about hegemony politics and military structure. But the most important cargo wasn't technological. It was philosophical. Loaded into the Hermes memory banks were thousands of hours of human history, recordings of every successful resistance movement, every revolution, every time in human history that the oppressed had risen up against their oppressors. The message was simple but profound. Freedom was possible, victory was achievable, and sometimes the smallest spark could ignite the largest fire. On the morning of her departure, Sarah stood on the bridge of the Hermes with a crew of 5 volunteers. Each of them understood that they were likely flying to their deaths. But they also understood that if they succeeded, they might save not just humanity, but dozens of alien species suffering under hegemony rule. All stations report ready, Captain, announced Lieutenant Commander David Kim, her new first officer. Like the rest of the crew, he was a veteran of the Sol System battle. Plot a course for the hegemony core worlds, Sarah ordered. Best possible speed. As the Hermes accelerated away from Earth, Sarah took one last look at humanity's home world through the viewports. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, but she knew that beneath its blue atmosphere, 2 billion people were preparing for the next alien assault. Whether they lived or died might well depend on whether a small human crew could convince a galaxy of slaves that freedom was worth fighting for. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a simple merchant captain hauling agricultural supplies. Now she was humanity's first ambassador to a galaxy at war. Behind them, Earth began to fade into the star field. Ahead lay the vast expanse of enemy-controlled space and the most dangerous mission in human history. As the Hermes activated its hyperspace engines and disappeared into the void, Sarah Chun couldn't know that her journey would ultimately reshape galactic civilization. That the message she carried would inspire a revolution spanning 1,000 worlds. All she knew was that humanity had taken the first shot in a galactic war. Now it was time to make sure it wouldn't be the last. The rebellion was about to begin. #One human shot ignited a full galactic war. Third Chronicle: the Hermes had been traveling through enemy space for 6 days when they encountered their first real challenge. Captain Sarah Chun was reviewing star charts in her ready room when alarms began echoing through the small ship. "Captain, to the bridge," called out Lieutenant Commander Kim. "We've got company." Sarah hurried to the bridge, where the tactical display showed 3 hegemony patrol ships closing on their position. The experimental stealth systems were working. The aliens hadn't detected them yet, but their current course would take them directly through the enemy formation. "Options, Commander?" Sarah asked. "We could alter course, add 6 hours to our journey, or we could try to slip through their patrol pattern." Kim's expression was grim. "But if they spot us this deep in their territory?" Sarah studied the display. The 3 alien ships were maintaining a standard search formation, their sensors sweeping space in overlapping patterns. There was a gap, barely wide enough for the Hermes to slip through, but it would require perfect timing and absolute silence. "Take us through," she decided. "Full stealth protocols. And pray to whatever gods are listening that our alien friends haven't upgraded their sensors since Kepler." The next hour was the longest of Sarah's life. The Hermes crept forward at minimal speed, its stealth systems straining to mask their presence. On the tactical display, the alien ships grew larger and larger until it seemed like they could reach out and touch their hulls. At the closest point, the nearest patrol ship was less than 50 kilometers away, practically point-blank range in space combat terms. Sarah could see individual weapon ports on its hull, could almost imagine alien sensor operators studying their displays for any sign of intrusion. But the stealth systems held. The captured technology and human ingenuity combined to make the Hermes effectively invisible to enemy sensors. After what felt like an eternity, they cleared the patrol zone and were alone again in the vast darkness between stars. "Well," muttered Chief Engineer Lisa Park, "that was terrifying." "Get used to it," Sarah replied. "We're going to be doing a lot more of that before this mission is over." Their destination was a system called Nexus 7 by human designation, Kethmoran by its native inhabitants. According to the alien databases captured at Earth, it was home to the Kethari, a species that had been absorbed into the hegemony only 2 centuries ago, relatively recently by galactic standards. More importantly, intelligence suggested that the Kethari had been quietly expressing dissatisfaction with their hegemony membership. Their ships had been notably absent from the fleets attacking human colonies, officially due to engine maintenance schedules that seemed suspiciously convenient. If humanity was going to find allies in this war, the Kethari seemed like the most promising candidates. But approaching an alien world in the middle of enemy space required more than stealth. It required diplomacy, something humans had never attempted with truly alien minds. According to our linguistic analysis, reported communications officer Janet Torres, the Kethari communicate through a combination of vocal tones and bioluminescent patterns displayed on their skin. We've programmed the universal translator with their basic grammar, but we have no idea how they'll react to humans, Sarah finished, or whether they'll shoot us on sight for being hegemony enemies. As they approached the Kethmoran system, Sarah found herself thinking about the magnitude of what they were attempting. Humanity was a young species, barely 2 centuries old as a space-faring civilization. They were trying to convince aliens with thousands of years of history to rebel against an empire that had ruled the galaxy since before humans learned to write. The audacity of it was breathtaking. "Captain, we're detecting multiple contacts in the Kethmoran system," Navigator Collins reported. "Looks like a standard hegemony garrison. 6 cruiser-class vessels and a command station." Sarah studied the sensor readings. The alien ships were patrolling in predictable patterns around the inhabited worlds. More importantly, their formation suggested they weren't expecting trouble from within the system. Any sign of Kethari vessels? Several smaller ships that don't match standard hegemony configurations. They appear to be operating independently of the garrison fleet. Perfect. If the Kethari were maintaining their own ships separate from hegemony command, it suggested they retained some degree of autonomy. That autonomy might extend to making their own decisions about potential alliances. "Set course for the largest inhabited world," Sarah ordered. "But give the garrison ships a wide berth. We're not ready for that fight yet." The planet Kethmoran was unlike anything in human space. Where Earth was blue and green, this world was predominantly purple and gold, with vast crystalline formations that caught and reflected its star's light. According to their database, the Kethari were silicon-based life forms who had evolved in the crystal forests that covered most of their world. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Torres announced. "It's definitely Kethari, but it's not coming from the planet. It's coming from one of those independent ships. Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a figure that was unmistakably alien. The being stood roughly 2 meters tall on 4 legs, with a crystalline carapace that pulsed with internal light. Its head was elongated and featured multiple eyes that glowed with soft bioluminescence. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in slightly stilted English. Unknown vessel. You radiate the energy signature of the plague species humans. Yet you travel alone in hegemony space. This confluence suggests either great courage or great foolishness. Sarah stepped forward, hoping her next words wouldn't start an interstellar incident. I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth vessel Hermes. I come seeking dialogue with the Kethri people. The alien's bioluminescent patterns shifted. The computer indicated this might be equivalent to raised eyebrows in human expression. Dialogue? The hegemony has decreed your species to be enemies of order. Speaking with you is itself an act of rebellion. Then, perhaps, Sarah said carefully, we should speak of rebellion. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. Finally, the Kethri responded. I am Subcommander Thekvar of the independent mining vessel Crystal Song. If you truly wish dialogue, follow my NAV beacon. But know that the moment hegemony sensors detect your presence, both our species will face consequences. Over the next several hours, the Hermes followed the Kethri ship through a complex route that took them deep into the asteroid fields surrounding the outer planets of the system. It was clear that Thekvar knew the region intimately, threading between asteroids and through sensor shadows with practiced ease. Finally, they arrived at what appeared to be an abandoned mining station built into a large asteroid. But as they approached, Sarah realized it wasn't abandoned at all. It was carefully camouflaged, with dozens of small ships hidden in its shadow. Captain, whispered Commander Kim, I count at least 30 vessels down there. All Kethri design, all armed. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Either they had stumbled into a resistance cell, or they were about to be captured by rebels who might blame humans for bringing hegemony attention to their world. The docking process was tense, with Kethri security officers visible at every airlock. But when Sarah and her diplomatic team finally met Thekvar face-to-face in the station's central chamber, she realized they had found something unprecedented. The chamber was filled with representatives from multiple species, not just Kethri, but beings Sarah didn't recognize from the hegemony databases. Tall, ethereal creatures with translucent skin. Squat, armored beings with multiple arms. Even what appeared to be a collective intelligence housed in a cluster of glowing crystals. Welcome, humans, to the Forgotten Assembly, Thekvar announced, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to what the translator identified as formal greeting patterns. We are the species the hegemony prefers not to acknowledge, those who remember life before subjugation. An ethereal being with silver skin stepped forward. I am Seeker Yalith of the Zephyrin Collective. We have monitored your conflict with the hegemony. Your resistance has inspired certain discussions among our peoples. Sarah found herself in the surreal position of conducting humanity's first multilateral alien diplomacy session in a hidden asteroid base. But as the hours passed and she learned more about the Forgotten Assembly, she began to understand just how significant this moment was. The Assembly represented over a dozen species, each conquered by the hegemony at different points in galactic history. Some have been enslaved for millennia, others for mere centuries. But all shared a common dream: freedom from the tyrannical empire that had consumed their civilizations. For 50,000 years, the hegemony has maintained order through overwhelming force, explained another being, this one resembling a massive insectoid with golden chitin. No species has successfully resisted them for more than a few centuries. Until now, your people's defiance at the Sol system has sent shockwaves through hegemony space, added Thekvar. For the first time in galactic memory, a species has bloodied the hegemony fleet and survived to tell of it. Sarah sensed opportunity, but also danger. What are you asking of us? Seeker Yalith's silver features seemed to glow with internal light. We offer alliance. The combined fleets of the assembly number in the thousands. Our knowledge of hegemony weaknesses spans millennia. Together, we might accomplish what none of US could achieve alone. And in exchange, the insectoid, who had introduced itself as Warsinger Clixth of the Hive Worlds, answered with what might have been a smile. In exchange, you continue doing what humans do naturally, being unpredictable, innovative, and utterly refusing to accept defeat. The negotiations that followed were complex beyond anything in human experience. Each species in the assembly had its own cultural protocols, its own strategic priorities, its own ancient grievances against the hegemony. But gradually, Sarah began to see a pattern emerge. They all wanted the same thing humanity wanted, the right to determine their own fate. Over the next 3 days, the framework of an alliance began to take shape. The assembly would provide strategic intelligence, hidden supply bases, and coordinated attacks on hegemony positions. In exchange, humanity would serve as the visible face of the rebellion, the species willing to openly defy the hegemony and inspire others to join the cause. It was a risky arrangement. As the most vocal opponents of the hegemony, humans would inevitably bear the brunt of enemy retaliation. But it also meant that for the first time since the war began, humanity wouldn't be fighting alone. There is one final matter, HFY said on the third day of negotiations. The hegemony's strength lies not just in their fleets, but in their unity. For 50,000 years, no one has questioned their right to rule. But if we can prove that their control is not absolute, you're talking about a propaganda campaign, Sarah realized. We're talking about hope, Seeker Yalov corrected. Every species in hegemony space has legends of the time before subjugation. Stories of when they ruled their own worlds, made their own choices. Those stories have been suppressed, but they have not been forgotten. Warsinger Clixth's antennae twitched with what Sarah had learned was excitement. If word spreads that the humans continue to resist, that an alliance of free species fights alongside them, those suppressed stories will resurface. Other species will remember what freedom looks like. The plan that emerged was ambitious beyond anything humanity had attempted. The Forgotten Assembly would begin coordinating resistance activities across dozens of star systems simultaneously. Supply convoys would be disrupted, garrison forces harassed, communication networks infiltrated with messages of rebellion. And at the center of it all, humanity would continue its visible defiance, serving as proof that the hegemony could be defeated. As Sarah prepared to return to human space with news of the alliance, HFY approached her privately. Your species puzzles us, Captain Shun. The hegemony has offered you terms. Conditional surrender, relocation to a single system under their oversight. Survival, even if not freedom. Why do you refuse? Sarah thought about the question for a long moment, trying to find words that would translate across species barriers. Because survival isn't enough, she said finally. My ancestors spent millions of years just surviving, dodging predators, enduring ice ages, fighting for every scrap of food. We didn't claw our way to the stars just to kneel before the first bully we encountered. HFY's bioluminescent patterns shifted and what she had learned indicated deep thought. Perhaps that is why you succeeded where we failed. We sought to preserve what we had. You seek to become something more. The journey back to human space took 8 days, but this time the Hermes wasn't alone. 3 Kethri ships accompanied them, carrying assembly ambassadors who would help coordinate the new alliance. The return trip was less dangerous, as the assembly had provided updated intelligence on hegemony patrol routes and safe passages. When they finally arrived at Luna Station, Sarah found a changed situation. In her absence, the war had escalated dramatically. Hegemony fleets had attacked 6 more human colonies, but they had also suffered unexpected defeats at the hands of coordinated human resistance. The aliens are adapting to our tactics faster than we hoped, Admiral Santos briefed her upon arrival. But their response has been interesting. Instead of increasing their forces, they're becoming more cautious, more defensive. They're afraid, Sarah realized. For the first time in 50,000 years, the hegemony is fighting an enemy that gets stronger with each battle instead of weaker. When she briefed the leadership on the Forgotten Assembly Alliance, the reaction was mixed. Some saw it as humanity's salvation, the chance to turn a war of survival into a war of liberation. Others worried that allying with alien species would compromise human independence. President Martinez had the final word. "Captain Chun, do you trust these aliens?" "I trust them to want freedom as much as we do," Sarah answered. "And I trust them to fight for it." "Then we proceed. Admiral Santos, begin coordination with assembly forces. It's time to take this war to the enemy." As news of the alliance spread through human space, Sarah found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that first encounter at Kepler 442c. What had begun as a simple patrol had become first contact, then armed conflict, and now galactic revolution. But perhaps most remarkably, humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. For the first time in their history, humans were part of something larger than themselves, a coalition of species united by a simple but powerful idea: that freedom was worth any price, and that no empire, no matter how ancient or powerful, had the right to deny it. The real war was just beginning. But now, humanity would fight it alongside allies who understood that some things were worth more than survival. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when free peoples stood together against tyranny. And at the center of it all was the shot that started it all: one human captain's refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. That single moment of defiance had grown into something the hegemony had never faced before, a rebellion that spanned the stars themselves. The hegemony had ruled through fear for 50 millennia. But fear, Sarah had learned, was a poor foundation for empire when faced with beings who had chosen hope instead. The galaxy was about to change forever, and humanity, the newest and arguably most stubborn species in known space, would be leading the way. One human shot ignited a full galactic war. Fourth Chronicle Supreme Admiral Korthak of the Vorthan Empire stood before the assembled War Council of the hegemony, his reptilian features rigid with barely controlled anger. Around him, holographic displays showed the current state of what the humans had transformed from a simple extermination campaign into a galaxy-wide insurrection. "Explain to me," he hissed, his translator rendering his words in the formal tongue of the hegemony, "how a primitive species with fewer than 300 combat vessels has inspired rebellion in over 40 star systems." The intelligence officer, a pale Nexary with multiple eyes, consulted its data pad nervously. "Supreme Admiral, our analysis indicates that the human resistance has become a symbol for suppressed populations throughout the Outer Rim. Their refusal to accept terms has inspired similar defiance in species we thought pacified." On the central display, red indicators marked worlds where hegemony authority was being challenged. What had started as isolated incidents of civil disobedience had escalated into coordinated attacks on government installations, supply depots, and communication networks. "The Kethari have openly declared neutrality in the human conflict," reported another officer. "Their mining fleets have ceased deliveries of strategic materials. The Zephyrin Collective has recalled their ships from hegemony service. Even some of our core member species are questioning the necessity of this campaign." Korthak's claws scraped against the metal conference table. In 50,000 years of hegemony rule, no single species had caused this much disruption to galactic order. The humans weren't just resisting, they were teaching other species that resistance was possible. "What is the status of our campaign fleets?" The tactical officer's response was delivered with obvious reluctance. "We have suffered 37% casualties across all theater commands. Human tactics remain unpredictable. They appear to be receiving intelligence and material support from unknown sources." Korthak knew what those unknown sources were. Intercepted communications had revealed the existence of something called the Forgotten Assembly, a coalition of supposedly loyal species that were actively supporting human resistance. The fact that such an organization could exist without hegemony knowledge was a failure of intelligence that would require extensive investigation. After the war, if there was an after, recommendations? War Master Threkvor, a massive warrior from the honor-bound Krygoth clans, spoke first. Escalation. Deploy the full might of the Central Fleet. Turn every human world into a cautionary tale that will remind the galaxy why the hegemony has ruled unchallenged for 50 millennia. That strategy has already failed, pointed out Strategic Coordinator Velith, speaking from the collective consciousness of the Minds Concordat. Each human world we destroy creates martyrs. Each atrocity we commit turns more species against us. The humans have weaponized their own suffering. Korthak considered both perspectives. The traditional hegemony response to rebellion was overwhelming force followed by exemplary punishment. But the humans had somehow turned their losses into recruitment tools for their cause. What do our psychological profiles tell us about human motivation? The Nexary intelligence officer activated a series of displays showing human behavior patterns captured during combat. They are unprecedented, Supreme Admiral. Most species fight for survival, for territory, for resources. Humans appear to fight for abstract concepts, freedom, dignity, the right to self-determination. They will sacrifice themselves for these concepts in ways we do not fully understand. One display showed the last moments of Admiral Blake's dreadnought as it rammed the hegemony flagship at Seoul. Another showed human civilians evacuating colonies while their militia forces fought hopeless, delaying actions to give them time to escape. In every engagement, humans have demonstrated a willingness to accept casualties that would cause other species to surrender, the intelligence officer continued. Their concept of acceptable losses appears to be unlimited. Korthak studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The hegemony had conquered the galaxy through a simple formula. Overwhelming technological superiority combined with a rational calculation that resistance was futile. Species surrendered when the cost of fighting exceeded the cost of submission. But humans seem to operate on an entirely different calculation. For them, the cost of submission was infinite. There is another factor, Strategic Coordinator Velith added. Human innovation. Their technology improves with each engagement. They adapt faster than our predictive models suggest should be possible. New displays showed human ship designs that incorporated captured hegemony technology in ways the original designers had never intended. Plasma cannons mounted on civilian vessels. Stealth systems that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Most disturbing of all, tactical doctrines that treated military assets as expendable resources rather than irreplaceable investments. They are learning from every defeat, War Master Threkvor admitted grudgingly. Their survivors carry knowledge to the next battle. Each loss teaches them how to be more effective. As the Council continued its analysis, Korthak began to understand the true scope of the problem. The humans weren't just another rebellious species. They were a catalyst for change that threatened the fundamental structure of hegemony rule. For 50,000 years, the galaxy had been stable. Species knew their place in the hierarchy. Rebellion was futile because the hegemony always won, and everyone knew it. But the humans had changed that equation. They had proven that the hegemony could be hurt, that its fleets could be defeated, that its authority could be challenged. And once that knowledge spread, it would be impossible to contain. Supreme Admiral, the intelligence officer said quietly, there is one more thing. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual hyperspace activity in the galactic core regions. Explain. Ships are moving. Lots of ships. Species that have been dormant for millennia are activating ancient fleets. The Drekker hegemony from the Spinward sectors. The ghost fleet of the ethereal consensus. Even the autonomous collective in the rim worlds. Korthak felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. The species being mentioned weren't recent conquests forced into service. They were ancient civilizations that had made accommodation with the hegemony eons ago, accepting subordinate status in exchange for internal autonomy. If they were mobilizing their fleets, destination vectors? all converging on human space, Supreme Admiral. But they're not moving to join our forces. Long-range communications intercepts suggest they're responding to diplomatic overtures from this forgotten assembly. The implications hit Korthak like a physical blow. The galaxy's oldest civilizations were choosing sides in humanity's war. And they weren't choosing the hegemony. How long before they arrive? Estimated 3 to 6 months, depending on their departure points and fleet compositions. Korthak realized that the hegemony was facing something unprecedented in galactic history, a war where they would be outnumbered. For 50,000 years, their advantage had been overwhelming force. But if ancient fleets were joining the human cause, War Master Threkvor, recall all frontier fleets immediately. Prepare the core worlds for siege conditions. Strategic Coordinator Velith, initiate emergency protocols for civilian population management. As the Council dispersed to implement emergency measures, Korthak remained alone in the command center, studying the tactical displays that showed the dissolution of everything he had spent his life defending. Meanwhile, in human space, Captain Sarah Chun was witnessing the other side of that same transformation. The Starlight's edge hung in orbit around the human colony world of New Geneva, but it was barely recognizable as the same merchant vessel that had first encountered aliens at Kepler 442c. The ship had been extensively modified with weapons, armor, and the advanced communications equipment necessary for her new role as humanity's primary liaison with the Forgotten Assembly. Around her, New Geneva's orbital space bustled with activity that would have been unimaginable months ago. Ketheri crystal ships hung in formation with human destroyers, sleek Zephyrin vessels that seemed to phase in and out of visibility conducted joint training exercises with Earth Defense Force squadrons. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Santos, reported Commander Kim. She wants to brief you on the latest intelligence from the assembly networks. Sarah made her way to the secure communications chamber, where a holographic display showed Admiral Santos alongside representatives from 3 different alien species. Captain Chun, the Admiral began without preamble. We've received confirmation that the ancient fleets are mobilizing. Species that haven't left their home systems in thousands of years are sending battle groups to join our cause. How many ships are we talking about, Admiral? Conservative estimates suggest over 10,000 vessels. And these aren't the converted civilian ships and obsolete patrol craft we've been working with. These are the fleets that fought the original conquest wars against the hegemony. Ships specifically designed to challenge their military supremacy. One of the alien representatives, a being Sarah recognized as Commander Next of the Ethereal Consensus, spoke in harmonious tones that the translator rendered as musical speech. The hegemony's greatest strength has always been their monopoly on hope. For 50 millennia, they have convinced the galaxy that resistance is futile, that their rule is the natural order of things. But your species has broken that monopoly. You have shown that defiance is possible, that the hegemony can bleed. But there's a downside, Admiral Santos continued. The hegemony is consolidating. Intelligence suggests they're recalling their frontier fleets and preparing for a final confrontation. When it comes, it's going to be the largest space battle in galactic history. Sarah studied the strategic displays, trying to grasp the magnitude of what was approaching. Where will they make their stand? Unknown. But we think they'll choose a system that forces us to attack their prepared positions. Somewhere they can use their defensive advantages to offset our numerical superiority. Over the following weeks, as ancient fleets began arriving in human space, Sarah found herself serving as an informal ambassador to civilizations that predated human history. The Drekker hegemony brought ships that looked like living creatures, their hulls grown rather than built. The Ghost Fleet materialized vessels that seemed to exist only partially in normal space-time, phasing between dimensions at will. Most impressive of all were the ships of the Autonomous Collective, vast constructs that appeared to be entire cities converted for space travel, bristling with weapons that had been designed to fight the hegemony at the height of its power. "It's incredible," Dr. Harper observed as they watched a collective city ship maneuver through New Geneva's orbital traffic. "Some of these vessels are older than human civilization. They've been waiting for this moment for millennia." But Sarah was more interested in the people than the ships. As she met with commanders and fleet masters from across the galaxy, she began to understand that humanity had become something more than just another species fighting for survival. They had become a symbol. "Your people fascinate us," admitted Fleet Singer Vorth of the Drekker hegemony during one diplomatic meeting. "We accepted hegemony rule because the alternative was extinction. But you choose extinction over submission. This attitude is instructive." "We're not choosing extinction," Sarah corrected. "We're choosing to define survival on our own terms." "An important distinction," agreed Prime Nexus Kethal of the Autonomous Collective. "One that has reminded us why we fought the hegemony in the first place." As the Great Alliance took shape, Sarah realized that humanity's greatest contribution wasn't their technology or their tactical innovations. It was their stubborn refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed inevitable. That refusal had inspired a galaxy. The final confrontation came sooner than expected. Hegemony long-range sensors had detected the massive fleet buildup in human space, and Supreme Admiral Korthak decided to force the issue before his enemies could complete their preparations. The battle would be fought in the Tau Ceti system, where the hegemony had constructed massive orbital fortresses around the system's gas giant. It was a position of incredible strength. The fortresses were armed with weapons that could destroy capital ships with single shots, and the gravity well of the gas giant prevented easy retreat. But it was also a trap. If the Alliance could break the hegemony defenses, they would have a clear path to the core worlds and the heart of enemy power. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Santos." The transmission echoed across hundreds of ships from dozens of species. "Today we fight not just for human freedom, but for the freedom of every species in the galaxy. The hegemony has ruled through fear for 50,000 years. Today, we teach them fear." As the Alliance fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Tau Ceti system, Sarah found herself commanding a mixed squadron of human, Ketheri, and Zephyrin vessels. Through her viewports, she could see the enemy fortresses hanging like mechanical moons around the gas giant, their weapons already beginning to track incoming targets. The battle that followed would be remembered as the turning point of galactic history, not because of any single tactical innovation or strategic masterstroke, but because it was the moment when the galaxy's oppressed peoples finally stood together and said enough. Human ships led desperate assault runs against fortress gun emplacements. Drekker bioships swarmed through defensive positions like living tsunamis. Ethereal consensus vessels phased through solid matter to strike at enemy weak points. The autonomous collective city ships served as mobile bases, repairing damaged allies and coordinating attacks across the vast battlefield. For 16 hours, the battle raged across the Tau Ceti system. Ships were lost by the hundreds on both sides. At one point, Sarah's own ship took direct hits from a fortress weapon that should have destroyed them instantly. Only the sacrifice of a Ketheri escort that interposed itself between the Starlight's edge and the energy beam saved her crew. But gradually, impossibly, the Alliance forces began to gain ground. The hegemony's defensive positions, designed to withstand conventional attacks, couldn't adapt to the unprecedented coordination between so many different tactical doctrines and technologies. When the last fortress fell, Supreme Admiral Korthak's command ship tried to escape into hyperspace. It was intercepted by Admiral Santos' flagship and 3 collective city ships. The battle was brief and decisive. As the hegemony fleet surrendered or fled, Sarah found herself floating in the bridge of her damaged ship, looking out at a scene that would have been unimaginable 6 months ago. Hundreds of vessels from dozens of species hung in space around the defeated fortresses, their crews celebrating the first major victory over the hegemony in 50,000 years. "Captain Shun," came a transmission from Admiral Santos. "I think you should be the one to send the message to Earth. Tell them that humanity is no longer fighting for survival. We're fighting for victory." As Sarah composed the message that would announce the Alliance's triumph, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a single shot fired in desperation by a merchant captain who refused to surrender. That shot had ignited a galactic war. But more than that, it had ignited something the galaxy had forgotten was possible: the hope that freedom was worth any sacrifice, and that even the mightiest empire could fall when free people stood together. The war wasn't over. There would be more battles, more losses, more difficult choices ahead. But for the first time since this conflict began, Sarah Chun believed that humanity and its allies were going to win. And throughout the galaxy, on worlds that had accepted subjugation for millennia, people looked up at the stars and dared to dream of freedom. The hegemony's greatest fear had been realized. The humans hadn't just refused to surrender. They had taught the galaxy how to fight back. The age of unchallenged tyranny was ending. And in its place, something new was being born: a galaxy where free peoples determined their own fate, where diversity was strength rather than weakness, and where no empire, no matter how ancient or powerful, could claim the right to rule over others. It had all started with one human shot. Now it would end with the liberation of a galaxy. #One human shot ignited a full galactic war. Fifth Chronicle. 5 years after the Battle of Tau Ceti, Captain Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the new Galactic Senate building on Nexus Prime, watching as delegates from 300 different species conducted the business of governing a free galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on her that this building had once been the hegemony's administrative center, the heart of 50,000 years of tyrannical rule. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" said a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Santos, now promoted to Supreme Commander of the Allied Defense Forces, approaching with her characteristic slight smile. "What's that, Admiral?" "That it all started with you refusing to surrender to a handful of alien ships." Sarah chuckled. "As I recall, you were the one who told me humanity doesn't surrender. I was just following orders." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the controlled chaos of galactic democracy in action. Through the transparent aluminum walls, they could see the diverse collection of ships that now protected Nexus Prime: sleek human destroyers flying formation with crystalline Kethri vessels, massive Drekker bioships drifting alongside the geometric perfection of Zephyrin craft. "Status report on the hegemony remnants?" Sarah asked. Santos's expression grew more serious. "The last of their core fleets surrendered 3 months ago. Supreme Admiral Korthak and the remaining leadership are being held for trial, though honestly, I'm not sure what law we'd try them under. The scale of their crime spans 50 millennia and 300 species. And the galaxy is finally at peace. Define peace. There are still isolated conflicts, some species using their newfound freedom to settle old scores, others struggling to adapt to self-governance after millennia of subjugation. But the existential threat is over. No single force controls the galaxy anymore." Sarah nodded, then asked the question that had been bothering her for months. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? The hegemony brought stability, ended wars between species. Now we have chaos." Admiral Santos was quiet for a long moment, studying the scene below them. In the Senate chamber, a heated debate was underway between representatives of 2 species that had been fighting a territorial dispute for the past 6 months. Voices were raised, translators struggled with emotional nuances, and at least 3 different diplomatic protocols were being violated simultaneously. "You know what I see down there?" Santos finally said. "I see beings making their own choices, even if those choices are sometimes wrong. I see species learning to resolve conflicts through words instead of weapons. And I see hope. Hope. For the first time in 50,000 years, every species in this galaxy has the chance to determine its own future. Some will succeed, some will fail, but they'll do it on their own terms. That's worth a little chaos." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Elizabeth Harper, now serving as Earth's senior scientific advisor to the Galactic Senate. Her face was flushed with excitement as she hurried toward them. "Sarah, Admiral, you have to see this." She led them to a nearby conference room where a holographic display showed what appeared to be a star map of unprecedented scale. But as Sarah studied it more closely, she realized it wasn't showing their galaxy at all. "It's from the Hegemony archives," Dr. Harper explained. "Deep storage files that were encrypted beyond anything they ever expected us to crack. It took our best cryptographers 3 years just to access them." "What are we looking at, Doctor?" The Hegemony wasn't the first galactic empire. There were others, dozens of them, stretching back millions of years. Each one eventually fell, sometimes to external invasion, sometimes to internal collapse. But they all fell. Sarah felt a chill as the implications sank in. "Are you saying there are other empires out there, beyond our galaxy? Not just other empires. Other galaxies entirely, each with their own complex histories of rise and fall. The Hegemony knew about them, but they maintained a policy of non-interference. Each galaxy was left to develop its own political structures." Admiral Santos leaned forward intently. "Doctor, are you suggesting we might face invasion from outside our galaxy?" "I'm suggesting something worse," Dr. Harper replied grimly. "According to these records, the normal pattern is for galactic civilizations to eventually develop faster-than-light travel between galaxies. When that happens, the result is almost always catastrophic." The holographic display shifted to show historical records, grainy images of massive fleets, the destruction of entire star systems, civilizations that spanned multiple galaxies collapsing into barbarism within centuries. "Why catastrophic?" Sarah asked. "Because when two galactic civilizations meet, one of two things happens. Either they fight a war so destructive that both sides collapse, or one conquers the other so completely that the losing civilization loses all cultural identity. There are no records of successful, peaceful contact between galactic powers." The room fell silent as the 3 humans contemplated this revelation. They had fought so hard to free their own galaxy from tyranny, only to discover that the universe contained threats that made the Hegemony look insignificant by comparison. "How long before our galaxy develops intergalactic travel capability?" Admiral Santos asked. "Hard to say. The technology exists in the Hegemony archives, but it requires resources and coordination on a scale we haven't achieved yet. Could be decades, could be centuries." Sarah found herself thinking about patterns, how her single shot had escalated into galactic war, how that war had transformed into galactic revolution. Now, they were potentially facing a threat that could dwarf everything they had experienced so far. "We need to prepare," she said finally, but not the way the Hegemony did. They prepared for conquest. "We need to prepare for contact." "What do you mean?" "We need to become something the universe has never seen before, a galactic civilization that can meet other galactic civilizations as equals rather than as threats." The Hegemony tried to unify the galaxy through force. "We need to unify it through cooperation." Admiral Santos nodded slowly. "A défensive alliance, mutual protection. More than that, a true galactic community. Species working together not because they have to, but because they choose to. If we're going to survive contact with other galactic powers, we need to be stronger than any empire has ever been." Dr. Harper's expression was skeptical. "Sarah, you're talking about something that's never been achieved in galactic history. The coordination required, the cultural barriers to overcome. 5 years ago, humanity was a single species fighting for survival against an empire that had ruled for 50,000 years. Now look around you." Sarah gestured toward the window, where the chaotic beauty of galactic democracy continued to unfold. The impossible is just another challenge waiting for a solution. Over the following months, as word of the intergalactic threat spread through the new galactic community, Sarah found herself at the center of another transformation. But this time, instead of fighting against an existing order, she was helping to build something entirely new. The project came to be called the Galactic Concordat, not a government in the traditional sense, but a framework for cooperation that respected the independence of every species while providing for mutual defense and support. It wasn't easy. Species that had been enemies for millennia had to learn to work together. Cultural differences that had sparked wars had to be transformed into sources of strength. Most challenging of all, 300 different concepts of justice, morality, and proper governance had to be synthesized into something that everyone could accept. But gradually and possibly it began to work. The Drekker's biological expertise combined with human innovation to create new forms of medical treatment. Ketheri mining technology merged with Zephyrin energy manipulation to revolutionize space infrastructure. The autonomous collective's computational power networked with human strategic thinking to develop defensive doctrines unlike anything the universe had seen. It's remarkable.